What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Racially Speaking, where we have real and honest conversations about race as it's viewed through the lenses of faith, family, and vocation. As always, I'm your host, David, and you are listening to episode 5. Last week, I had the pleasure of having a conversation with one of my new friends, Debbie Carlier. Debbie and I actually have a lot of mutual friends who, at least on my end, have sang Debbie's praises to me for a long time, so I'm really glad we got to record this together. Debbie is originally from upstate New York, has spent time in Boston, Massachusetts, Hong Kong, and most recently has lived in Blacksburg, Virginia for the last 20 years. Debbie also works at Virginia Tech University and is a passionate advocate for racial justice. Furthermore, this conversation was also really personal and even therapeutic for me, as Debbie is also a fellow Asian American. With that said, in our conversation we discuss a lot of different things. Specifically, we delve into our different upbringings as Asian Americans, we open up about the racism we've endured as it's often gone unnoticed, we discuss the importance of knowing both the interconnectedness and distinction between the different types of racism different communities face, and last, we begin the episode by addressing the sudden rise in violence and overall anti-Asian sentiment toward the Asian American and Pacific Islander, or the AAPI community here in America. As always, I hope that my fellow people of color feel seen and heard by this conversation, and that it is helpful and informative to everyone who listens. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Debbie Carlier. Well, hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Look, I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. I mean, you don't know this, but the plan was, you were always somebody I was going to reach out to come on here. So, I mean, one, I'm excited that it's sooner maybe than I'd planned because I've been wanting to have this conversation. / maybe, which we'll get into in a second. Maybe I wish it wasn't on the terms that we're going to discuss necessarily, but nevertheless, I'm really excited to do this with you. For our listeners, I'm trying to do better with giving my guests time to introduce themselves a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am second generation Asian American and mostly Chinese with about 1/8 Japanese blood in me. What else could I say? I grew up in upstate New York and did some schooling in Boston and actually lived in Hong Kong for 9 years. Had my husband and I lived for 9 years. So did development and relief work in China with World Vision, and worked for a university there for a bit. And it had both of our daughters were born in Hong Kong. So we joke that they're more Chinese than I am. So they were offered Chinese citizenship, which we probably said, no, we'll keep American citizenship, Yeah. But, and right now I'm here in Blacksburg. I work at Virginia Tech as Director of Strategic Initiatives and Engagement in the College of Engineering. Yeah.
Wow, that is an awesome title.
It's a long title. It really means jack of all trades. Give her the projects that nobody else wants to do. So I'm half joking.
I mean, I heard engineering and you're at Virginia Tech, so that sounds important to me.
It's a good school, but I'm not even an engineer. So it's even more funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you're just up the road. I look forward to the time where we can maybe do more meeting in person, get to know each other a little more.
I'm looking forward to that too. I want to know your family more.
Yeah, definitely. So you got 2 daughters, right?
Yes, Melissa and Megan.
Okay, and you said they just got married this last year or last year?
They got married in 2019, the same summer, and I loved them to death. But
back to back. Wow.
Back to back. That was a very busy summer. So they definitely kept us busy. One is finishing up her master's in cello performance, and the other one is working It's a lot of fun. She got to meet Yo-Yo Ma,
Oh
played
my
for him
gosh.
recently.
That's
That was very
fantastic.
cool. Yeah. And then the older one is actually working for the government, and she works with unaccompanied children in the refugee and resettlement organization. Yeah, for the government.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for giving us a little bio, little snippet.
Sure.
Definitely.
So,
Well, like I said, I'm really excited to talk to you and learn from you. Thank you again for coming on. We're early on in this podcast. This is only, I think, episode 5. But something, unique about our conversation is, we're new friends. I would even say, kind of acquaintances. And before, my guests, Christy, Dylan, and Zach, I've known for quite some time. So I'm excited to, be able to do this while we're, recorded, and also delve into some of these topics. With that said, there's not like an easy way to transition. We're both Asian American, and, we're intentionally, obviously, have seeked each other out to, see how each other are doing, I think, and learn from each other. So for those of you listening that might not be, caught up on some of the stuff happening, a lot, I think, on the West Coast, but it's really all over at this point, is just the sudden rise recently, but then also probably over the last 4 years, big picture wise, but the sudden rise in violence and racism towards Asian Americans and the AAPI community, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. And so, Debbie, we wanted to come on and have a conversation about that, and share some thoughts. So to give kind of a backdrop, I just wanted to read something so that we're all on the same page, everyone listening, and just kind of go for it and delve into some stuff. So this is something I recommend following the handle Asians for Anti-Racism Instagram, and we'll give plenty more recommendations. But this is lengthy. I'll just preface it by that, but I want to give kind of a good backdrop for us to jump into. So here we go. In the months since the corona pandemic began, thousands of Asians in the U.S. have become targets of harassment and assault. The racist incidents began as the first cases of coronavirus spread across China last December, and disinformation reigned. As infections appeared in the U.S., President Trump repeatedly referred to COVID-19 as the China virus and Chinese flu, and pushed a disproved theory that it had originated in a Chinese lab. By April, an IPSOS, which is a research organization, poll found that 3 in 10 Americans blamed China or Chinese people for the virus. This fear is not new. In the past century and a half, the United States has made laws and national policies out of discrimination against ethnic groups, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to Japanese internment during World War II. Historians and activists fear that today's targeted political rhetoric and harassment mirrors moments in the U.S. history when racism became state-sanctioned. As the incidents of harassment against Asians rose, A3PCON, which is a California-specific organization that advocates for the AAPI community, they asked the California Attorney General's office to collect data. It declined, so the organization built its own reporting pipeline. Within 2 weeks of launching on March 19th, the Stop AAPI Hate Tracker had received nearly 700 reports. From across the country, people described being spit on in grocery stores, yelled at on their jogs, and called racist names while waiting in line. It would be a mistake to think of these as isolated incidents. There's a recipe for growing seeds of hatred into exclusionary national policy. Begin with political leadership that elevates... There's a recipe for growing seeds of hatred into exclusionary national policy, and it cites someone named Kulkarni. And he or she, I'm not sure, says this begins with political leadership that elevates the fear. Stir in media support, top off with popular culture that perpetuates stereotypes. You really need that whole ecosystem, but it's very easy when there are these underlying beliefs for America to snap back into it. And that was all a quote from Kulkarni, the researcher. It's a constant fight because these racist tropes are really part of the American fabric. They're more American than not. And in the past century and a half, the United States has enshrined discrimination against ethnic groups into laws and national policies. In the 1880s, yellow peril, which is fear of an Asian invasion, and resentment of the cheap labor coming from China paved the way for the Chinese Exclusion Act, banning both new immigrants and existing residents from becoming U.S. citizens. At the turn of the century, a rise in Indian immigration sparked dusky peril, a fear of what a Washington newspaper then described as Hindu hordes invading the state. During World War II, another perfect storm led to Japanese internment. Editors at newspapers like the LA Times voiced their support for that policy, while war propaganda depicted Asians as crafty and cunning. And this is, if you've been following the news, right on topic. In one Dr. Seuss cartoon, rows of Japanese Americans line up on the West Coast to collect a brick of TNT or dynamite, waiting for the signal from home. The tagline says, on February 19th, 1942, Franklin Roosevelt ordered more than 120,000 Japanese Americans into internment camps. And then finally, after 9/11, Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, many of whom were South Asian, documented scores of revenge-motivated crimes in the United States. Among the first killed were Sikh gas station owner Balbir Singh Sodai, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right, in Arizona, and Vasudev Patel and Waqar Hassan, again, hopefully I'm pronouncing those somewhat accurately, two South Asians in Texas. And then here at the end, there's always been a systemic, official, and unofficial exclusion for Chinese, and this pandemic brought the debate back up again, says Chan, another researcher. When they look for someone to blame, they blame the Chinese. America has been slow to acknowledge its anti-Asian history. In 1988, President Reagan apologized and paid restitution to survivors of Japanese internment camps. The Supreme Court ruling that enabled internment was overturned in 2018, and California apologized for its role earlier this year. In 2011, the U.S. Senate formally apologized for the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the House followed the next year. But the full history is rarely part of public school education. Part of the problem, says Adrian De Leon, an assistant professor of American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California, is people saying this could never happen in America. The rest of us whose communities have suffered this can't imagine it happening. That is the manufactured historical ignorance that allows this nativism, racism, and contemporary violence to fester. All right, good job if you stuck with me through all that. Everyone listening, I know that was a mouthful. I wanted to give us, Debbie, some kind of backdrop. There's plenty of other things I could have read, to be honest, and you know that. But out of what I just read, what sticks out to you, and how should we, me and you and those listening, be responding to that information?
Well, something I've been thinking about a lot that relates to this is that this is how I feel Asian Americans they're not always considered full-fledged citizens. Maybe they never have been, but when it's convenient, they're more of a citizen. When its circumstances change, it's easy to drop them. And that's how I've been feeling. And I think that given the history that you just went through, that you just shared here, it shows that we've never really addressed the problem, or there's at least maybe some things have been addressed, but there's still a ways to go because, you mentioned that stop
Asians for Anti-Racism.
Yeah. I think they have new stats out. It's like they have recorded 2,808 cases of violence against Asians.
This was an older post.
That's an older post. So from March to December. And so that's like huge amount of cases. And I think that there have been reports saying that's like 1,900% more than normal. And I think that was because of the pandemic and Trump's, president number 45's repeated references to COVID-19 being the Chinese virus or Kung flu or China virus. I think all those terms were thrown out.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was a little bit older post, and it didn't include many of the versions of that, whatever you call it, racial slur, kind of.
And I think that has basically set the tone for a lot of anti-Asian sentiment and backlashes in real, things even in our community. So,
yeah, I mean, I think you touched on this a little bit. It's important to, I mean, you referenced former President Trump. A lot you could unpack with his role in all of this, but I think it is important to even separate. We're not claiming that he created this sudden rise on his own, right? Like it's something that just has been going on for years and years and years and years and years, but hasn't changed completely. Maybe it's gone through waves of looking more convenient, like you said, or has gotten quote unquote better. But with it being deeply embedded in communities, these cultural communities, I guess we know better, right? Based on personal experience, collectively and individually. It's just interesting, Trump isn't the president anymore, but we're still, this rise is happening now post his term. And so the damage has been done. And this is what I think I would say I've been meaning when I've told, those close to me of, I don't naively think that once he's gone, everything's going to be great again. In fact, I'm not gonna say I see everything coming by any means, but the damage has been done in so many ways. There's going to be so much that could probably get worse in some ways, and then still so much to heal from. And I think, with him, literally, I can't count how many times I saw him leading chants, Kung Flu at his rallies, and how that is not him creating racism, that's him perpetuating it. And let's say he even didn't perpetuate it. How many times he was given an opportunity to just, I think a normal human being, a caring human being, maybe, to separate himself from it, double down. And so I think, I don't know, that reality, I think we, going back to the question, have to grapple with regardless of being Asian or not. I don't know do you have more thoughts on that one?
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. He had opportunity. It's not that Trump had created this situation. We have a history that you just read through, but he had a lot of opportunity to speak up and speak against anti-Asian sentiment, and he didn't. I think he just did the opposite by using these terms. I think that it also has been a challenge. It creates a good challenge for Asian Americans to think about how they can change some of the ways. I think, at least from my observation, I feel that we're not very outspoken when it comes to, I think, I could be wrong, but my observations of the Black American community is a lot better at speaking up against anti-racism. Against racism. I think we could, I know for myself, I should really speak for myself. I realize that I've always been more silent about things, or maybe not so observant. I also realized that being married to a Caucasian American, a white American, gives me a lot of cover. I have privilege with that. So, but if I were to walk into a major grocery store, like a big one near our place, by myself, I wouldn't feel so comfortable in this climate because of experiences my friends have shared with me in the past year, because of the pandemic. So there was one friend whose wife was shopping in our local, I would say one of our local Walmarts, I won't say where. And for 30 minutes, there was one woman who heckled her and just basically called her a China virus. You are a China virus. You're a Chinese virus. And said this repeatedly and told her, take back your defective masks back to China, take them back to China. And this went on for half an hour, and nobody stepped in to help her or to offer help or to see if she was okay. Not one person, not even a staff person. And so she was just left there to handle this by herself or endure it. That was quite shocking, to learn about that.
I mean, you mentioned even just the word shocking. So that was even one thing I think is interesting to talk about. So I'd say it makes sense for that to be shocking. But I mean, for you personally, I'm genuinely wondering, are you shocked overall with the anti-Asian sentiment that is going on right now? Does that make sense? Like, me, I can understand. I know I would personally be shocked if someone, harassed me or assaulted me. I'm probably less and less shocked right now, if I'm honest, but it would feel shocking. But do you overall, with the rising sentiment of anti-Asian racism, feel shocked based on your own experience?
Growing up,
growing up or just living, living in America.
Living in America. I think that's interesting. I don't know how to quite answer that. I think that the incident that happened, that I just shared, that happened in Walmart, happened in March. So I have to say I was pretty shocked. Right. My experience in Walmart 2 months earlier, in January, before the news really got out, but I was ahead of the curve. I was buying face masks for my friend in Hong Kong because she ran out. So she said, can you get me some? So I was going to send it. I go there and there's no mask left because all the Chinese students had come back and they bought them, right? Because they knew that this was big. And at that time in January, I don't think at least this area didn't take the pandemic seriously. And so when I went, I got a really nice, actually, to say something nice about Walmart, a very nice staff member who actually took my request seriously because I couldn't find face masks. And she finally went around looking with me. And she said, we've run out because all the Chinese students have been back and buying it up. And she said, I understand that this is serious. And, because her sister's husband did work in Korea. And so he was under quarantine by his wife. His wife said, I love you, honey, but I have 4 young kids at home and I just don't know anything about this. You need to stay in a hotel for a while. So I found a good staff worker, to help me. But I will say, I had my own personal experience too recently, this past summer. Was surprising. It feels different when it happens to you, and so
sure. It's
not like I didn't have any incidences when I'm growing up. It's been a long time. So I feel, and I've been in Blacksburg for 20 years, and this is not, really haven't experienced anything like this before. But I think it's the, the circumstances that we're living in. I was walking out of the student center with a friend, and she was Asian, and we were both wearing face masks, and we were walking toward a parking lot. All of a sudden, this car full of 4 white young college men, started screaming from their windows were all down and they were screaming at us. And I turned my head and, because I thought, is this directed to us? I don't know. But yes, it was, because they zoomed in on us, made eye contact, stuck their heads out even further and swerved into the parking lot to get close to us. And I told my friend, probably, I just said, we're not going to the parking lot. We're going right back into the student center. And I think back on that and I feel kind of mad at myself. It's like, I should have been more prepared. I was just kind of shocked that, I just didn't expect anything like that. But I think it's because we were wearing masks and we were Asian. And there was another incident in Blacksburg on move-in day where a student and her parents were walking in downtown Blacksburg, and a number of students from afar, white students, screamed, "Hey, you Chinese people! Hey, you Chinese people!" And well, they were Asian, but how do you know they were Chinese? And they had no relationship, and there was no reason to say that. There's just so things are a little tense around here, more than normal.
I would agree. And based on my personal experience, I think I'm both shocked and not shocked. Like I'm shocked, when I hear, these statistics, and then even when I hear a personal story, like one that your friend encountered, I don't know if I'm not surprised by even the one that you just said you personally encountered, but overall the anti-Asian sentiment doesn't surprise me at all. And I don't say that to, sound like, oh, I told you so. It's more just I experienced it my whole life at different parts, whether I was on the playground when I was really little. But I think I'm just going to assume you and your kids experience this, and please tell me, I'll be shocked if you say no, but we've all experienced, being mocked for our slanted eyes, right? Things like that. I had a conversation actually, I think, with my wife recently, and she was reading a book. The author is Asian American, and she, kind of detailed being on the playground for the first time, and someone being mocked and being mocked for the first time, and someone pulling back her eyes and, calling her something. And even my wife, who, is pretty informed with this kind of stuff, was like, well, that she almost wanted me to say that that never happened to me. She's like, that was just her, right? Like, that's not a normal thing. And I was just like, no, like that's like the most common thing I could ever think of. Like that is, she didn't even have to write that for me to know that happened. I'm assuming with your, that's something you've been used to.
Yeah. But I have to say that for emotional reasons or whatever, like you try to protect yourself and you don't think about it much, but I have recently, like because of things happening now, I have revisited my childhood. And I would say that like one incident is, in around first grade, I started to, I would walk to the bus stop, and there would always be this Jewish girl who was a couple of years ahead of me. And she just would always harass me or bully me, chinky, calling me chinky Chinese. And for her, I think it was just, she thought it was fun, but I didn't think it was fun. I didn't even, at that age, I was barely speaking English because I only spoke Mandarin Chinese up until age 5 because my grandmother was living with us and we just spoke Mandarin Chinese. But I knew enough to know that was some derogatory slur. And then over, a couple of years later, she became like a safety officer. And, safety officer is somebody who's supposed to have a lot of integrity. That's how you get this position. You watch for the safety of children walking the hallways in the elementary school. And she, was an older upperclassman, 4th or 5th grade. And I finally started thinking, how could she have gotten that position? She was so mean to me at the bus stop, So I had enough English, in me, and I was able to write out a note to her. And I passed it to her in the hallway as she's standing in her uniform, with the orange slash. And she then took that note. And after that day, she stopped bullying me at the bus stop. So at least I had something in me I don't know why, I must have had it. First grade wasn't all that easy. There was another incident too. There's this one guy who kept on calling me catty eyes. I had these, I don't know if it's because my eyes were slanted, but I also had these catty glasses at the time too. So it's like double whammy, right? So catty eyes, and hearing it repeatedly in class just didn't make me, I wasn't very much in control of my emotions. And one day I just cried and cried and cried. And I think it was shocking to him. And he did stop after that. I don't know. So I don't know. Yeah, I've had those are my young childhood incidents. I do remember even as a college student, I was visiting my husband, who was my boyfriend then, and walking down the hallways of our big, our huge technology university, MIT, right? Walking down the hallways. And this guy, I think he was a staff member, maybe a cleaning staff worker, came down. I mean, it was just me and him. We're walking past each other, or we're zooming in on each other. And he starts saying, chinky chunk, ching, 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 chunk. And I thought, really? Why here? I mean, aren't we grown-ups here? Like, why at this stage? So that was a little odd.
Yeah, like you, the current climate has definitely, forced me to reflect a lot. And unfortunately leads me back to certain things in childhood, because and it's eerie having little kids now, but to know that it does start that early in so many incidents, like that on the playground, that it takes place for, for whatever reason, educators that are listening can, chime in and let us know why. I don't know why that's the case, but, for me, I kind of kick myself. Obviously it's probably a good thing I didn't, but I want to be like, well, I wish I would have gotten in more fights almost. Cause I'm like, I should have spoken up, for myself. But I think, I don't know, for me, it's helpful to understand why I felt how I felt. And I think as the more people I talk to that can empathize, it seems like that's not an uncommon response, or the lack of response is not an uncommon response from Asians and Asian Americans.
Yeah.
I feel like it is connected to how we're told to act. And I feel like I don't know if you agree, but falls really closely under the model minority myth that we live under. And, I'd say still do for sure. That being, and feel free to add to this, that, Asians are, literally the model minority, if, they're hardworking, they're smart, good at math. Then there's the other ones, no taekwondo and karate, all these things, prepare for spelling bees in their spare time, just all these things. For me, for those of you who don't know, I'm adopted. I didn't grow up culturally Asian. I kind of don't fit any of those stereotypes for people that know me. I kind of like what you said with the feeling of not reacting. I feel like that was almost a reaction of having internalized Asians don't speak up, or Asians don't fight back. You're this, like, you're the model minority, you're soft spoken, you're in the middle. And just little, comments, throughout my life growing up, I can remember them really clearly. And like, oh man, that definitely shaped me in some way. And one that comes to mind was in middle school. And was it the kind of dance where the guy asks a girl out, Sadie Hawkins, something, whatever.
Yeah, something. The girl asked Sadie Hawkins. Girls asked the guy
so maybe it was
dance.
the opposite. I don't know. Maybe it was the opposite. And we were talking. One of those was coming up. I don't remember the details, but I remember someone telling me, I can't remember why race was brought up, but I don't know. We were having some stupid middle school conversation, but part of it ended with someone being like, oh, well, you could ask a black girl or a white girl, because you could go with either, you're in the middle. And just, I remember,
really?
Yeah, I remember in the moment, like, I didn't know how to react. I was kind of like, like it. And I think the person kind of meant it as a compliment, but it was she was also putting me in my place and telling me what, what my limitations were, or choices were. And all the while they're saying what they could do. And it just
putting a social kind of order to things.
Right. And that, I can see how that shaped how I viewed people and relationships. And yes, all that to say, these things we've mentioned compiling on one another with the current rise in anti-Asian sentiment, the overall, existence and rise doesn't surprise me at all because of personal experience. But sure, like the actual rise in violence and all of this is, I'm not going to say I expected that necessarily. So I think it's this weird middle of like shock, but not shocked.
Yeah, I hear you. I think the worrisome thing happening is the number of Asian elderly people that are being attacked, violently attacked. And they're just walking down the sidewalk and getting attacked. That is shocking. That is pretty brazen, right? It's not like saying words. It's actually physically shoving and hurting. That is bizarre.
Yeah. So that's got to shock anybody. Not just one, but multiple attacks. The elderly is just another level.
Take the most vulnerable. You mentioned my kids.
Yeah.
I have to actually ask them more. I realized that I really didn't ask how their experience was growing up here. I don't know why. I think, well, they're Happies, right? So, and also their last name is, Carlier. So it's not an Asian name. I think that they had a little bit of cover and privilege because of that. And it's hard for me to evaluate how Asian they look. So, my oldest, I feel like there's some facial features that to me are very Asian. If she has like dark brown hair with highlights sometimes in the sun during the summer, but if it were all black, maybe she would look even more Asian, right? I don't know. And then
I can give you some pointers, but I haven't met your kids, so I can't even chime in.
Yeah. Well, and then my youngest one is often mistaken for like some European or Hispanic or Italian, but not really Chinese. So I don't think their experience has been, I don't know. I really need to ask them what it's been like for them. I don't think it is quite as bad, but they struggled with the bicultural thing or tricultural because they were born in Hong Kong. That was the real thing for them because
can you elaborate? Like what?
Well, having like culturally, there's a part of me that's quite Chinese. I love Chinese food, so they love Chinese food. They lived in Hong Kong in their early years. The oldest was 6 years old when we came back here, but we used to go back every 3 years. So she remembers a lot of that. So I remember the first year she lost a lot of weight because she wouldn't eat sandwiches. Because she's like, what is this? This is not lunch. Lunch has to be hot with rice, right? So, I'm sure there were some cultural issues like that. And maybe the way, Paul and I, it's a fusion of East and West, rearing kids. And maybe I had more sway because I was the mom. So, and what I know is and that's what I'm used to. My parents, are first gen Chinese. So their upbringing was a little different, I think, than they're different from their peers here.
Right.
I had them do the Chinese thing that I thought I would never do, but I had them play like string instruments. So I don't know, but
as you're bringing, their stories up, that would just be super interesting. I mean, I selfishly want you to follow up and hear from them just because, having two kids of my own that are, you said, mixed.
I call them Happies. I call them Happies.
Yeah. I think look like right down the middle, like both of us, like both Caitlin and I, Caitlin, who's white for, I think probably everyone listening knows that, but, Ollie, my 5-year-old, also oldest, going back to, how early it can start. I've already witnessed him have a microaggression said to him. And so that's one thing. And I think it's really common for Asians to experience, but like the food shaming thing, that's something that I, and again, I told you a little bit about my story. I'm not culturally South Korean. I don't, really identify with that. I identify with the culture I was brought up in, but
your skin color and your facial features, you can never escape that.
Right. The food. So the food shaming is really common. And I still, to this day, I've kind of gotten over it, but some of my friends from college will remember this because I think it was not until college where I really understood how to articulate it a little bit, but, I'm still insecure if I'm sitting around, on campus or somewhere eating sushi. Cause I'm like, all right, who's going to say something? Who's going to say something about me liking rice? I just expect it. I just grew accustomed to living with that kind of, fear, or else I would just avoid eating that kind of thing if I was in like a group setting. Just cause I was like, I don't feel like dealing with the ignorant comments. Anyway, going back to, your kids, I would assume, and I'm wondering this for myself too, and my kids, but I would assume they would probably, and you ask them this, but probably more, I would say, heard the question, what are you? Or like that kind of thing.
I need to ask them. It's silly. I have never really asked them that question. Yeah, I'm going to have, you're making me think that I need to have
I don't want to make you feel
conversations.
bad.
No, it's not bad. I mean, I'm sure that there are struggles I've never talked to them about, but they're different. They're definitely going to be different. Yeah, I'll have to ask.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
I think also there are phases in their life where they felt more like they identified more with their father, culture. And there are other times when Paul's culture, and sometimes they felt they identified more with my culture, right? Because he spent years, using Mandarin Chinese, and he studied Chinese after marrying me. And so some people would say that I would definitely say his Chinese reading is better than mine.
Wow.
And maybe, yeah. And he can speak Chinese fluently. So
I didn't know that. That's incredible.
Yeah. So, and he went, because we lived in Hong Kong for 9 years. I mean, I think he embraced a lot of the culture there just because he liked a lot of it. He just loves to eat. So Hong Kong food is awesome. So having said that, there are things that humor wise, I think they probably identify more with him that stems from his own cultural background. They make fun of me. My daughters make fun of me because I'll slip in some words that are not quite right, or cliches that are not quite right. I can't even think of one now, like top of my roof. What do I mean? The top of my mouth, something like that.
Okay.
Just because there's, even though I was born in America, I did have, I spoke Chinese up until age 5, and you can't hear an accent, but I think there's like small things that indicate that, at home, English was not the first language. So a little bit of that. And it's all fun though.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool to hear. Both you processing what, your daughter's likely experienced. So, I mean, you touched on this some, and it's okay if there's not much more to add, but, what would you say benefiting from something like white adjacency looks like for you, or maybe has looked like for you? Because like you said, Paul being white, and how do you see it being connected to things like the model minority myth?
Well, I'll speak upon first what it's like having a white husband, and I think only in recent years I've realized that going to the airport is with him gives me some cover. If I go to the airport to travel and I'm blessed, well dressed, and I'm all by myself, I think I would get not as nice service. I don't know. I noticed little things like that. Having him, being connected to him, I realize makes it easier for me. I have single friends who are Asian, and they share with me, they remind me that it's easier for me, and they're right? So because especially at least my Asian female friends, I think they have a harder time sometimes in certain contexts. They don't feel as protected. And I think they feel like they don't get the same level of service or just respect in certain circumstances, not in every circumstance, but there are some. In terms of how this relates to the model minority myth, I guess I'm trying to think of, I guess it reminds me of that case. Did you hear about the Harvard admissions case where there was a lawsuit that was...
was it the one, it was almost like backwards, like were they declining Asian people, or right? No? Yeah, okay.
They're kind of like
bare bones. I can't remember all the details.
I think that they were basically saying that Asians were the lawsuit was suggesting that they were being discriminated against. And by, I think, given, I had read somewhere, and I don't know how true this is, but that, like a -50 in the score or something like this. I'm not sure what the number was, but somehow that they were being rated on a different scale, that they had to achieve higher then there was a response that said, hey, well, actually, if we adjust for that, then it affects the white people as well. And so it's kind of pitting the Asians and the whites against the Black community. So kind of I think the rebuttal was like, hey, it's not just Asians. We also have some type of parameter for whites, even though it's not as high. But if you adjust for this, it comes down. And really, I don't even know if I'm answering your question quite right.
No, that's great. That's fine.
But if I took this, just keying in on the model minority myth, I think it does damage to, like, for example, the expectation is that Asians should be really good at math. If you ask my brother, he says that's ridiculous because I know my math is terrible. And yet,
same, awful.
Yeah. His expectations are, he's just like, I'm not good at math, but he's a great, he's very witty. He's a very successful manager in in the corporate world, business savvy, great manager. And yet he's not a math genius, but he felt that constant pressure. And I think also the other myth that Asians are submissive and they are doing well in society because they work hard and they're responsible. Even the reality is there are some Asians that work really, really hard and they don't get ahead. So they're facing discrimination. I know that my experience living in suburbia, USA is different from a lot of my friends in Boston who grew up in an urban setting. And for a lot of them, their parents were working in restaurants too, as well, trying to make ends meet. And my friends didn't have a chance to see them much growing up. And so I feel like they had to work a ton hard, a lot harder than I did to get, and they're doing quite well very well. They're smarter than me. That's fine. But I feel like it's not, I think I was lazy compared to them. That's what I'm saying, because my parents, I think they came over. My dad had the benefit of education in Taiwan. And then he was able to get into a good graduate degree program here. So I felt like I had some privilege, there. So I don't think all Asians have the same experience. I had it easy.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's, I think that's key of just, and you should say that about every people group. Like I think it's dangerous, the model minority myth that is, because it obviously perpetuates stereotypes, but it kind of limits and stunts possibilities for an entire people group to live freely, I guess. But it also, historically, model minority myth, like all those words are really powerful. So like the model part has and is currently being used, to pit us against the Black community or other communities throughout history. But, where the model minority myth or being a model minority is pitted against the historical myth or belief that the Black community is the opposite, right? Is lazy, can't get jobs, lack education, can't do all these things. And it's a way to uphold historically white supremacy. Which is, I know, a harsh word to say, but go ahead.
I mean, we're like, Asians are supposedly closer to white when it's convenient, not in the current climate. But I can see going back, like certain eras, you see that, like I said, like we're full-fledged citizens or more full-fledged when the circumstances are right. And therefore, when the circumstances are right and we're closely affiliated with the white group, that really pits us against the our Black American communities. And that is not good, because the same systemic racism and the same racial attitudes that they have to face are things that, we Asians have to face too, when it's not convenient. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, it's a problem that is bad for all society, whites, Asians, and Blacks. We need to solve this. We have to get rid of it. But, there's, tensions between Asians and Blacks, which saddens me. I feel like, I think growing up in the suburbia USA, since we didn't have too many Black Americans in our community, I didn't have I had friends, but they weren't very close. And I would say that I didn't experience a lot of tension, not because it just, the demographics. But I know for friends of mine who lived in more urban areas that there was, tension, and maybe it's because resources were scarce and there's competition for business when you're in the same neighborhood. So I think that I understand that at least that's my observation. And I know I have a dear friend who's is a Black American, and he's a colleague, and I have other Asian American colleagues. And one thing that we've been trying to do is read a book together. We're reading Toni Morrison's book, The Origin of Others. And
I keep seeing that.
Yeah.
So, I teach English, and I'm terrible. I have read 0 Toni Morrison books, so I keep finding myself having to admit that. So I have to get on that.
This is my first book, and I've just started reading it, but we plan to actually, we've invited 20 other faculty and graduate students to come together and talk about a diverse group, so there'll be great. Asians and Blacks. And I think it's, as a Christian, I believe in Imago Dei, that we're all made in God's image, and every person, is fearfully and wonderfully made, and that we should celebrate any, ethnic differences that we have as something beautiful. And I'm hoping that Toni Morrison's book is going to have a lot of overlap in that area. But I'm looking forward to that. And I think this is one way my diverse friend group is, we're trying to help heal the process, help to appreciate, each other's ethnicity, and be aware of some of the racial injustice that each group has faced, and come alongside each other and be prepared to speak up for one another.
I mean, the silver lining for the current, climate we're in, especially over the last 4 years and right now, 2021, the silver lining for me has been the natural unity, at least for myself. I won't speak for everybody, but the unity for people of color that we've almost been forced to have, of understanding each other's history and being there for each other as we navigate together our different experiences. But I don't think there would be this kind of unity amongst people of color without some of the terrible things that have been happening. So I say silver lining, lightly. Obviously, I'd rather it not be the case. But I mean, that was kind of, by the way, you've done an incredible job of just swooping through all the questions without me even asking them. So that's, you've covered, that's fantastic. But one which you've already again begun to touch on was, so what do you think it looks like for the AAPI community for us to advocate fully for ourselves without contributing to things like anti-Blackness, like the anti-Blackness rhetoric, which we've touched on a little bit. So, I guess what I mean is, I think historically model minority myth rhetoric pits us against the Black community, the AAPI community against the Black community. And I think personally, I see this right now as, I struggle with this some, but overall as a people group, I feel like we've struggled with feeling confident enough to speak out for us for a lot of reasons. But one of them for me is I don't know if I should, how much to grapple with, because the Black community has had it so much worse, which is fine, which, and is true. There's certainly stuff I've learned about the Asian community that I didn't know about that is in some ways just as heinous, but I'm in a weird kind of tension with that, because it's like I don't want to be I don't want to be an all lives matter person, you know what I mean? Like at this time, because that's absolutely true. And what do you have? Help me out. What do you think about that? I'm giving you really easy questions.
No. I mean, I don't know. I'm also struggling with this. I mean, I obviously, usually when we talk about inclusion, diversity, and equity in our workplaces or in society, it's usually the conversation about Black and white and the tensions there and the racial reconciliation. And then Asians sometimes feel like, wait, like what about me? You know, like I'm a person of color, right?
Yeah, I have a great, I'm right with you. I have a good example. I'm in a book discussion group with colleagues as well on a book we're reading, but we're in the group, and a colleague who I don't know very well, but she's Asian or Asian American, and English is certainly not her first language. And we were talking again, like just the black and white, the contrast between black and white racism and stuff. And she kind of chimed in, not aggressively or anything, but was, I think getting the courage to speak up for herself. And she said, well, there's other races. Like, I feel like we need to talk about all the races said all lives matter. And I felt a little bad for her because, most people were like, oh shoot, shuddered. But I felt bad because there's certainly unawareness of what that would mean to certain people, and also double down and say, this is kind of twofold. That's, I think it demonstrated what I'm kind of fumbling through of like, it's that reality of awkwardness. Like, well, I want her to speak up. Yeah. Obviously that's going to hit people the wrong way currently right now. Yeah. But also I'll say, like, it was really cool to see someone respond who I'd gotten to know off and on through our book group. A white colleague was actually the one that spoke into that, like, super eloquently and gently. It was just like, because we kind of just moved on, and he was like, I just want to go back real quick. Good. And I can remember in our first group, like, he wasn't in this place, and he's like, I just want to go back, no disrespect or anything, but just, it can be, and explained, what was problematic about stating that at the time. And so I thought that was great, because it was somebody that was willing to speak up, who's white, to advocate for the Black people in the group.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I think that Asians need to do a better job of understanding the history. Like, I know that I started to do that after the Charlottesville rally. I'm such a baby. I feel like me too. I'm crawling, trying to catch up, because I never got educated. My history or social studies classes did not teach me a lot of, what slavery was like for the Black community, what the civil rights movement, we glossed over it very quickly. And I just lost a lot of the details. And so I think that if we don't, that's why it's so important to understand the history. And without that understanding, we can't, Asians will have a harder time coming alongside and speaking up. But they need to do their due diligence. They need to study up on this to understand. Personally, my Black friends are so great. During this time, they understand. So they're so empathetic, and they're so like I got a text from one of my Black friends that said, hey, I just read the CNN report on violence in the Asian community and Asian sentiment. I feel so terrible. I'm so angry. And I can't believe this, he totally understood what it felt like. Right. And I think the Asians should realize that the Black community can actually come alongside us too. Right. But it makes it hard if you don't understand how much more layers and layers of suffering, kind of like if you peel back an onion, you're going to see that there's a lot of suffering, that we've never had to deal with. I feel like we could talk more and more, but a lot of
always.
There's so much.
Always.
Yeah.
I always like to end with doing some recommendations. So I was kicking myself because we scheduled and planned this time, in advance to meet, but I feel like this weekend and just this last week, there's been a bunch of stuff that I plan to watch that has come out movies wise that I'm like, oh man, I wish we could have, we'll have to do it again, but I wish we could have watched some of these and then.
Minari, you mentioned?
Right, Minari. I wish I could have watched these and then recommended them after we'd watched them, but I'll still recommend them. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll do a follow-up somehow. Yeah. But Minari, I know very little about it. I know it's about a Korean family that immigrated to America and it won a bunch of awards. And kind of the hot take on it is that it won Golden Globes for, I think, something like Best Foreign Film. But the hot take is this should not just be a foreign film because it's the most American story there is out there. And so I thought that was an interesting take. I haven't seen it, so I can't comment, but the preview looks fantastic. There are, a couple other movies coming out, but Disney's, which I just heard the preview, it's Raya, not Raya. Raya and the Last Dragon.
I think my son-in-law recommended that. Yeah. Okay. Raya.
Yeah.
What is it?
I'm not sure. It's a fictional place. I'm pretty sure. I watched the preview. A story. I'm fumbling through it. I can't remember which culture it is. But it's the main character, Raya, is a little girl trying to find the last dragon for something, and I can't remember. That's a terrible summary, but it looks fantastic, and it's voiced by Awkwafina from. I don't think she's the main character. Yeah, I don't think she's the main character, but she's one of the main characters. Awkwafina from Crazy Rich Asians.
Yes.
And I forget the main character's name, but that looks fantastic.
Looks great.
And then Nomadland, which I again don't know much about, but I hear that's getting a lot of attention and stuff.
So, good. I have.
All right, that's a lot of recommendations of stuff I have not seen. So the other recommendations, yeah.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yeah, no, I was going to get to you. Go ahead.
Because you were interested in. You said you were. This is actually before we started, but you said you're interested in getting into your own. I guess ethnic heritage.
Yeah.
And learning more about that in Korea. Well, I'm a K-drama freak, so I just wanted to tell you. So if you ever want some K-drama recommendations, I recommend Crash Landing on You.
Okay,
Number one.
Someone recommended that recently too. Yeah, that's on Netflix, right?
Yeah, it's really good.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that is fantastic.
It's wonderful.
I have a couple lighthearted ones because I know stuff we talked about, and oftentimes with this educating ourselves with these issues can be heavy-hearted. So I got some other lighthearted recommendations. One, have you seen Always Be My Maybe? It's on Netflix. It came out, I think, a couple years ago. It's comedian Ali Wong and Randall Park, who's from
yes, I did see that. I forgot the title. Yes, I watched it.
Me and Caitlin loved that movie.
Really? It was funny.
It's a rom-com, but fantastic. Cultural depictions, and just I thought it was a really good movie. Really fun to watch. It's not a hard thing to watch. It's really good and educational at the same time.
Yes.
And then for rom-com people, no shame, I love rom-coms. Caitlin and I just watched it's a trilogy. To All the Boys I Loved Before, which is it's like a high school rom-com.
Okay.
And main characters Asian, and the last one they go to actually Seoul, Korea for part of it. And I don't know, I think
I'm gonna have to watch that one.
It's awesome to watch more and more lead Asian characters in films.
It is cool.
Which me and Zach talked a lot about in one of our episodes, but there's more and more, and so I'm happy to see a lot of those.
What about Kim's Convenience? Do you like that one?
That's been on the docket for, I haven't seen that. That's been on the docket to watch. Yeah.
Oh, it's very cool. Netflix, Kim's Convenience.
Right. I keep seeing it. It's one of my advertisements. So every time it comes off, I'm like, I got to watch that. I got to stop rewatching The Office and jump into that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you watch Parasite at all?
No, I didn't watch that either.
That's a
I know I'm
dark
so far
one.
behind, Debbie. Yeah, that's what I heard.
That's a dark one. I mean, Paul and I watched it, and it was very well done.
Hmm.
But it's dark, and I don't have interest in really seeing it again. So even
Yeah,
though
I
I
heard it was
think it
dark.
was done well done, it's just like I don't need all that darkness. There's enough darkness. No, but
Right. My struggle is I tend to like the dark movies,
yeah,
but whenever with two little kids, whenever we have
yeah,
like Kate and I have a free night to like watch a movie,
yes,
yeah, it feels mean of me to be like, oh, let's watch Parasite or something like that. Like we
yeah,
much
yeah,
rather watch,
yeah.
Always Be My Maybe,
Yeah, I know that's
something like that.
something that is lighthearted. Yeah.
So yeah, look, thanks so much for doing this, Debbie. I learned
Yeah.
a lot from you, and yeah, I just enjoyed hearing more of your story.
Well, I look forward to having more conversations with you. It's really a joy to be here, and um, I think I learned a lot from you, actually. So thank you for having me.
Well, next time, I mean, we'll definitely do another one because I want to hear about the follow-up conversations from our recommendations, and then also your daughters.
Yeah, I need to. I'm going to talk with them. You made me realize I need to talk with them. So
All right. Well, thank you so much, Debbie.
thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Again, a big thank you to Debbie for doing this episode with me. I'm certainly wiser having engaged with her, and I hope that you feel the same way. As always, please check out the show notes for links to the many things we referred to throughout the show. Also, if you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram at DMFipsy. That's DM as in Matthew, Fipsy with the Y. And feel free to reach out in my DMs if you ever want to dive deeper into something that you've heard on an episode. I'm all ears. Our music was, of course, written and produced by Dylan Dent, and our artwork was created by Ashley Bush. See you all next time, and thank you so much for listening.